This week, we are walking through one of the most iconic places in New York City, Coney Island. So I will walk on the famous Boardwalk from the Seagate community all the way to Brighton Beach, which is about 2 miles worth of a walk one way. So as we begin, we have Seagate, which is a private gated community with its own interesting history, and hopefully at some point in the future, I will make a video on this as well. Today, Coney Island Beach is filled with life and entertainment, but one can argue that it is just a shell, a fraction of what it once used to be. Because you see, about 100 years ago, this was the most popular destination for all New Yorkers. In fact, originally, up until like 1880s or so, this was an area which attracted mostly wealthy New Yorkers. And even at that time already, there were really interesting attractions like, for example, the Elephant Hotel, which opened in 1885. But unfortunately, it burned down just a few years later, 1896. But look at how cool this building was. And a fun thing to think about is that the Statue of Liberty was not standing yet when this hotel opened, which means for a few months before the Statue of Liberty was actually put in its place, immigrants coming to New York City would not see the iconic Statue of Liberty. As they were sailing into the New York harbor, they saw this elephant building. However, with more railroad lines being built, steamboats beginning to provide better service, and better connection to Brooklyn by roads, not to mention the subway opening later in 1920, the area began to see more and more not just middle-class visitors, but also working-class families. As by the end of the 1800s, not just easier travel to the area made it more possible for people to visit, but also the fact that they finally had the time to do it, as the city, and in general the country, was changing with workers demanding not just better conditions in the workplace, but also more time for leisure, with a growing demand for an 8-hour workday. Now, that did not happen right away, and on average, people still worked a lot more hours than we do today with a standard 40-hour weekday. But still, the trend was beginning, where ultimately people wanted to really just have more time to enjoy life and not just be working all the time. And on a personal level, more than 100 years later, I seem to have missed that memo, because a 40-hour work week for me is like a small vacation. But Coney Island became the place to see, as not only were there bathhouses, restaurants, dance halls, hotels, but more importantly, at its height, there were not one, not two, but 3 amusement parks next to one another. There was the Steeplechase Park that opened in 1897, Luna Park opened next in 1903, and finally Dreamland in 1904. In fact, all the way until Disneyland opened in 1955 in California, Coney Island was the most popular amusement park in all of the United States. At night, it had to be magical, as Dreamland amusement park alone had about 1 million light bulbs illuminating the night sky, not to mention the other 2 amusement parks adding to the brightness. Luna Park had such features as Japanese gardens, Eskimo village, and a Dutch windmill. In the 1920s, the Boardwalk was also added for the whole stretch of the beach, and till this day, a really amazing place to walk on. But just be careful where you are stepping. I have seen some people walk barefoot coming out of the beach, but in some places like here, the screws are sticking out, so always make sure you look where you are stepping if you want to play a daredevil with no shoes. Otherwise, you are asking for an afternoon nap by crying yourself to sleep in pain. Here we have reached one of the famous spots on the Boardwalk, Child's Restaurant Building, which was a very popular chain restaurant in the 1920s when this building was built. It really has very beautiful, terracotta details with sea and water themes throughout. Ships, fish, I'm guessing Poseidon, the Greek god of sea. But really interesting to look at from up close. And then next to it is the amphitheater, which I have never been to yet for any event, but it does look pretty nice. As we continue our walk, we see right there in the back a baseball stadium, Maimonides Park, the home of the Brooklyn Cyclones, a minor league baseball team. I have been to maybe 1 or 2 games here, but that was when I was in college, so it has been years since I last came here. And then in the back of the stadium, so by the boardwalk itself, is the parachute jump, which was originally built for the 1939 World's Fair, which took place in Corona Park in Queens. After the fair closed, the parachute jump was moved here, and it continued to provide entertainment until 1964, I guess, when the Steeplechase Park closed, which was one of those 3 amusement parks I just mentioned. So Steeplechase was the oldest one. There are 12 arms on top, and the riders would be raised by rope to the top, and then a 2-person seat would be dropped, guided by cables on its descent and being slowed down by a parachute, and then all the way at the bottom, brakes. So cool. And it's too bad it's not operating today. But you know what else is fun? The Steeplechase Pier, which actually extends a pretty far way into the water. Check this out. Here is the edge of the beach, and we still have all this length of the pier to walk through. But once you go all the way to the end, you have a beautiful view of Coney Island, and believe me, seeing it on camera is not the same as actually being there in person. It is simply more spectacular if you see it with your own 2 eyes. But I also got lucky because as I was walking on the pier, there was an older gentleman who had a small radio with him, and he was playing 1920s jazz music. And oh my goodness, I know it is weird, but just walking here and listening to the waves crashing on the shore and the 1920s jazz music really setting the mood, it was honestly one of the best 15-minute experiences I had all week long. But of course, it does not mean I was completely in La La Land. There were things I was still puzzled by. For instance, what exactly was this screw supposed to hold in place as I was sitting on the bench? I guess I will never find that out. Next to the parachute jump, we have the carousel and Luna Park. But this is not the original Luna Park amusement park. So like I mentioned, the Steeplechase Park, where the parachute jump is today, closed in 1964. And then the 2 other amusement parks burned to the ground. Luna Park burned in 1944 and Dreamland in 1911. You know, come to think of it, fire was something tremendously problematic in the history of New York City. And when you think about it, playing a very big role in the development and change of the city itself. There were 2 big fires in the city during the American Revolution, 1776 and then 1778. There was the Great Fire of 1835. The Crystal Palace was burned to the ground by fire. Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, which I already covered on this channel, as well as General Slocum disaster. And again, something I mentioned while in Astoria Park. And the list goes on. And these amusement parks being part of that list. So the original amusement parks are no longer here, but in 1962, another amusement park opened called Astroland, which remained until 2008. And that one I did go to when I was a kid. I do not remember much, but I do remember riding on the Ferris wheel and the Cyclone. This roller coaster right here, which is still operational, you can still go on it, and it's running since 1927. So cool. And as you see today, we have Luna Park once again, but again, it's not the original one, but it does carry its name. Oh, and you know what else honors the original amusement parks? These creepy smiles. I know it's a throwback to 100 years ago or so, but I still can't get used to them. But since you are here, you can stop by, for instance, famous Nathan's Hot Dogs, which opened its doors in 1916. And in fact, in honor of putting this video together, I actually had Nathan's hot dog myself today. Yes, it was store-bought, not from the original place in Coney Island, but still, close enough. And continuing our walk, we will come across the New York Aquarium. Another amazing place with great history, and it's a place I have not been to in years. In fact, I don't even know or remember the last time I was here, so probably when I was a kid. Which, you know what that means, at one point or another, I will have to show it on this channel and revisit some of my steps from childhood. And we also have like these beach modules, which are built on concrete legs. They were built after Hurricane Sandy, which heavily damaged the area in 2012. They have things like offices, restrooms, medical stations, but again, they are raised off the ground in order to protect them against any possible future storms that might hit the beach. And walking even further, we enter Brighton Beach, which to me has this more kind of relaxed vibe. I always thought of Coney Island Beach as like the city, Manhattan. And then Brighton Beach is like an outer borough of Queens or Staten Island. And then even further down, there is Manhattan Beach, which is really sort of like a suburb, someplace in Long Island, for instance. But something I will touch upon in the future, as that area also has a very interesting history. But it's kind of interesting that all these beaches are right next to one another, and yet to me, they give off a little bit of different vibes. So if you truly want to relax and just be left alone as much as possible, I would stick with Manhattan Beach. If you want some company, some life, some excitement, entertainment, then Coney Island Beach is the place for that. And then Brighton Beach is somewhere in between. And so I was now slowly heading back to where I parked my car, and I thought my trip was over, but little did I know, my day was about to get very, very interesting. As I was walking back, not on the boardwalk and by the ocean, but rather on the street, a lady walked up to me and asked me how to get to the boardwalk and to the ocean. So I pointed to the entrance, which happened to be about one street away in the direction I was walking in. And hence, as we walked together, she began a conversation. At first, I learned everything about her life, from her sister-in-law, which she seemed to have particular problems with, to other family issues, and lots of other things I wish I can simply forget about. In fact, the only thing that she did not tell me was her bank account number, because I certainly know what her bank is. Anyway, after a few minutes, I finally thought I am free, and I could begin somehow piecing my sanity back together. But no, because at this point, she revealed why she actually came to the beach by showing me her ankle, which seemed like just, I don't know, badly irritated skin, maybe an allergic reaction, eczema, something like that. Naturally, I would suggest seeing a doctor, nurse practitioner, some sort of a medical personnel, but she had other plans, because you see, her plans, and listen closely, was to mix ocean water, which she had a bottle for, so ocean water with garlic and urine, her pee, and cover her ankle with that. To me, this sounds like a cocktail of ingredients that might actually create a new pandemic for the world. And since I lived through COVID-19, I was really tempted to stop her. But she turned around and walked away before my brain was actually able to process what I just heard. But you know what? What a way to start off the summer. I was waiting for some sort of an interesting story like this. You know, maybe some dude walking into a subway with a grizzly bear on a leash as a support animal. Something of that nature. And on that day, I got what I was waiting for. This is the New York I know. Beautiful, exciting, and just freaking weird enough to have you second guessing your existence and life in general. I hope you enjoyed this walk, and I do have so many other things to show you, so hopefully I will see you soon. Bye.